Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning for those on the West Coast. My name is Ben Schrag, and thanks for joining us. Before we get started here, let me introduce myself. I am one of the program directors here in the Small Business Programs at the National Science Foundation. I also have on the line here and in the chat a colleague, Steve Konsek, who's also a program director, and the two of us will be tag teaming here a little bit today to try to answer any questions and to work through the content here. So appreciate your time today. Just to set the stage here, this is one in kind of a series of webinars we have for different things within the small business programs at NSF. Specifically today, we're going to really talk about the full proposal step. So as most of you know, there is a project pitch, which is something that is done online as the first kind of formal step in our process, and that's like 2 or 3 pages of information that you would submit through our website as a first set of kind of views of what you're doing to figure out if you might be a good fit. And then based on that, if you're invited to submit a full proposal, then you would submit a full proposal through the NSF Fast Lane system. And it's that full proposal that we'll be talking about here today. I have a few slides here I'm going to go through and just give you some basic information and then open up for Q&A. For those of you, I guess if you're hearing my voice, you're already on the phone. But this is something where if you had a question, the audio of today has to be accessed through a phone line. It's not something where, unfortunately, we have the ability to listen through your computer on the internet. So hopefully, Steve, you can send a note to everybody in chat to remind folks of that as well. Again, I have about 10 or 15 slides, and so in about 20 minutes, I'm going to open up the floor to questions and answers, and we'll be taking those by phone and primarily. One thing I will say is we anticipate having a pretty large number of attendees today. We had several hundred registrants. We would love to answer all your questions, but we also are hesitant to keep you guys all on a 4-hour webinar. So we are going to end this for sure no matter what by 3:30 Eastern, so in about an hour and a half today. And for those of you who don't get your question answered, apologize for that. We would love for you to send those questions, if you don't get them answered today, to our kind of general mailbox, which is SBIR@nsf.gov. You can also find information for all the program directors on our website, which is at seedfund.nsf.gov. The other thing I will say is that I will send these slides. These slides actually I think are available because we've done the similar version of this webinar before, but all the slides here will be available after the fact. You can, again, I think you can probably get them from our website, but if they're not there, you can always email, again, sbir@nsf.gov. Okay, so let me dive in here and just cover the high points. The other thing I'll say about questions is that we hope that you will stick to questions that are somewhat relevant to a broad set of applicants. If it's a question that's very specific to your small business, we would encourage you to take that directly to a program officer by email or by phone, or to the SBIR@nsf.gov email line. Okay, so first thing I'll say is that our website is a great resource. This is what you see when you go to the site, seedfund.nsf.gov. The Apply section has a number of resources. It has kind of a timeline for how our process works. There's also a set of slides and kind of links for applicants for the full proposal at Phase 1 under the Resources tab. You'll see the For Applicants section there. Those are great places to get kind of the general information about how to apply. And I'll walk through a few of those things, but almost everything I say today, almost everything I reference is available on our website or through our YouTube channel in some cases for videos. The YouTube channel is also linked to on our website. So again, this is kind of a rough sense of the process. The project pitch is something that is required. You're welcome, obviously, to do some of these other things before, but if you have not gotten a project pitch submitted and invited for a full proposal, that is really something that you should focus on first before anything else. So we really encourage that. We assume that most of the folks on the webinar today have been invited to submit a full proposal. And so we'll walk through this, but basically there's a few things you have to do to get from the invited stage to the I've submitted my full proposal stage. And one of those is kind of a set of registrations, if you haven't already registered your company, to allow the government to consider funding you. And we'll walk through those. And then as far as the full proposal goes, that will be submitted in the NSF FastLane system. And the solicitation is the document that at NSF is kind of the go-to document for how to submit a proposal. So when in doubt, what's in the solicitation is what is the real rules. So that's something where that's probably your number one source of written information for the full proposal. The other thing that I'll talk about is we have an actual document called the step-by-step guide, which is not so much about what you put in your proposal, but more about how do you actually get that information to NSF, how do you use the machines, the levers of our submission process. So the solicitation and that step-by-step guide together, I think, are a pretty good set of guidance documents to submitting a full proposal. The other thing I will say is that we have quarterly submission windows here at the SBIR and STTR program. The current window closes on September 3rd. It closes at 5 p.m. based on your local time for your company. So after 5 p.m., whatever time zone you're in, on September 3rd, our submission window will close, and it will reopen on September 4th at midnight. So it'll reopen a few hours later. If you're able to submit your proposal by September 3rd, that's great. If you miss that window and you're not going to make it, there's another window that will close in December. You're allowed to submit your full proposal at any time, but obviously the fastest response to your full proposal will happen if you get it in kind of towards the end of a submission window. So if you can make September 3rd, that's the recommended path. If you can't make that date, or maybe a day after in some cases, you should think about, if it makes sense to try to build more strength into your proposal and submit in December, although you could theoretically, again, submit any time during the window. So I think most of you know this, but the phase one is a 6 to 12 month R&D effort. It's a $256,000 award, and then sets you up for a phase two proposal, which recently also changed and is now $1 million. And then we have additional opportunities for phase two awardees where you can actually get additional funding on top of your phase two. So to give you a sense of that, if you're doing well commercially and you can really show us that you're making great progress, you really give yourself a good chance to get some of the supplemental funding. Our last couple of years, our base phase two award has been $750,000, but because of this supplemental funding, our average phase two ends up above $1 million. So in reality, that $1 million phase two opportunity will turn out to be, for many of you, more like 1.5 million or even more than that. So this whole opportunity is up to about a $2 million opportunity for you, and it'll be over, typically at least 3 to 4 years, sometimes even 5 years through all the phases. So we talked a little bit about the project pitch. There's an entire separate webinar talking about what's in the project pitch, so I don't want to get into detail for that. As I mentioned, it's on our website. If you have not submitted it, please go to the website and kind of take a look at what's involved there. It's a pretty quick look, and it's something that you get responses to within a week or two, typically 3 weeks maximum in most cases. And the project pitch is something where the program director who is leading the portfolio area that you are applying to would actually respond to you. So for all of you who have gotten invited to submit a full proposal, you were invited by a program director, and that program director is, in almost all cases, the decision maker for your full proposal. So you're obviously welcome to reach out to Steve or I with general questions, but if you have very specific questions about your full proposal and the technology you're working on, the best place to address that is to contact the person who sent the email inviting your full proposal. Okay, now let me talk about the full proposal a little bit. There are 4 registrations that are government mandated in order for you to be able to submit a full proposal. And in fact, the first 2 here are going to be required for you to even get into NSF submission window, our FastLane and our research.gov system. So you're not going to be able to even begin, in most cases, your full proposal until your DUNS and your SAM registrations are active. So those are definitely the number 1 and number 2 priorities here. The DUNS, all the registrations and all the information about what to do is on our website and in the solicitation. The DUNS is dnb.com. the System for Award Management is at SAM.gov. These registrations are all free. They're all government registrations, and so I will mention that nothing you ever do to try to apply for funding at NSF will cost you. So if somebody's asking for money, you're welcome to pay them, but it's typically somebody where you're not required to work with them. Just want to let you know that some people are approached by certain third parties trying to get money out of you guys. So I just wanted to let you know that that's not a required path. The government will not charge you to apply. The last research.gov is NSF's kind of administrative hub for submitting proposals to us. And then the fourth item here, the Small Business Administration, that is at SBIR.gov or at SBA.gov. You can get there. And it really is something where any small business that's applying for any SBIR or STTR proposal anywhere in the government does eventually have to register for on the SBA's website with some basic information. You don't actually have to do that in order to start your full proposal, just FYI. Okay, so again, we have two systems, just so you know. The research.gov is where you'll start to register your company, but Fastlane is actually where you're going to create your proposal. There is ability for some people who are working with NSF to submit their proposals through research.gov, but not for SBIR and STTR proposals. So you will have to go into Fastlane to start your proposal. So just make sure that the system should send you the right direction, but if you're in research.gov and you're trying to create a proposal, you're in the wrong place. Again, all this is at our website, seedfund.nsf.gov/apply. I talked about the solicitations a little bit. As I mentioned, they are good through December. And these two documents are for the two different programs we run, but as you'll see, they're almost identical. There's a few differences in terms of the budget, but almost all the criteria, the goals, the amount of money, the time, all that other stuff is the same. So if you're trying to really stress about SBIR versus STTR, in most cases, it's actually not something you need to worry about too much. And in fact, we also have the opportunity, the ability to potentially switch you from an SBIR to STTR if you agree during the phase one process, if we feel like it makes more sense. So I would caution you about worrying too much about SBIR versus STTR too early on. We talked a little bit about there's not many differences between these two programs. The one big difference is that the STTR program does require your small business to partner with a research institution, typically oftentimes a college or university, but it has to be a not-for-profit research performing organization. And the way that we look at that partnership is that a certain amount of the budget has to go to that institution. It has to be at least 30%. In either of these programs, the small business is the lead institution. That's the institution that we're going to fund. That's the institution with which we have a relationship. And the PI is always part of the small business for both of these programs. But in general, if you're looking at having a project where it makes sense to take a lot of the work and have it done by a college or university, for example, the STTR program may be a better fit. If most of the work is going to be done by the small business, then SBIR is probably the best fit. And beyond that, I wouldn't think too deeply about the difference between these two programs. Okay, so this is an excerpt from the table of contents of the solicitations, and the key takeaway here is that all the nuts and bolts about what you're trying to put in the proposal are mostly in Section 5 of the solicitation. So in general, any of the contents are there in that section. If you can't find it there, then in general, it's either not important or it's something you'd have to ask us about. I think there's other places where you can get a lot of information about the kind of format and the content of the proposal. The one kind of key piece of your phase one proposal is called the project description. It's a maximum 15-page document, and exceeding that 15 pages is one of the few ways that you can get your proposal just rejected before it's even looked at. So please be careful on the page limit there. There are several sections we recommend you submit. We really strongly suggest that you kind of follow this format. If you don't follow the format, you should at least make sure that the kind of different questions and different information that we're looking for are contained in some format in your project description. And, most of you probably know by now, but our program is really looking for two things. We're looking for a small business that can identify a clear, compelling commercial opportunity, including having done homework on understanding who your customers are, what the value proposition is for the product you're building, what the competition is, and really having started to convince us that you can aggressively commercialize and get your technology into the market. And the other piece is, again, the technology is what a unique, innovative, deep technology approach are you going to bring that is unique to you that's going to create an unfair competitive advantage for your company in the market. So what's the technical silver bullet? Why is it not just 10% better than what else is out there, but maybe 10 times better? And why is it something that is both unique to your company so that you can protect it, but also still risky so that NSF funding is required to get it to a place where it's starting to become a viable product? So those are really the two things, the commercial and the technical side. And that's what we look at the project description to try to get. Those are the go, no, go, the big go, no, go criteria for us. There's also a bunch of information in Section 5 covering the other parts of the proposal. There's a lot of other supplementary documents, your team's bio sketches, your facilities, your letters of support, your budget. The big thing I would say here is that the budget is kind of complicated and confusing. It's the source of a lot of questions that we get. The budget is something that is almost never the reason for a proposal getting funded or not funded. It is something that if we're going to fund you, we'll have to fix and make sure it's compliant, make sure it fits with our rules. But there's an opportunity later in the process for us to change almost anything that you got wrong in the budget. So we appreciate you guys trying to make sure you're following the budget rules, but I would encourage you to do your best and not stress too much about the budget. As I said, I know other agencies may take a really hard line towards budget errors. They might even not fund you because of that, not even look at your proposal. At NSF, most of the companies that apply to us and most of the companies that we fund are brand new to government funding, and therefore we understand that you're going to make some mistakes in how the budget works. That's fine. We're looking to fund startups, great entrepreneurs. We're not looking necessarily to have people who are completely well-versed in government funding and contracting. So feel free to ask questions about the budget, but also understand that if you're spending hours and hours trying to worry about some details of the budget, you're probably worrying about the wrong things. So I'm not going to walk you all the way through it, but this is the kind of masthead of the FastLane system where you will be submitting the full proposal. You start the proposal at the Proposals, Awards, and Status tab at the top left, and from there you should be able to follow the step-by-step guide, which I believe I have a link for later. For those of you to understand the process of what happens after you submit, I just want to mention a couple things that are helpful once you do submit the full proposal. We have a pretty slow process. We send out almost all of the proposals we receive, anything that is compliant on the kind of basic requirements, which is about 97 or 98% of our proposals. We send it out to external experts, to people who are deep experts in the technology and the commercial side of things. And they give great reviews, they give us great advice, but that process takes a little while. And so your typical timeline here is that you're not going to hear usually anything for up to three months or maybe even 4 months after you submit. And you may not get a final decision until as much as 6 months after you submit the proposal. We've been working to make that number lower, but with COVID and with a lot of interest we're getting, we have a pretty high workload right now. So in general, you should be prepared for a pretty long waiting period. The other thing you should know is that you're not going to actually see any updates on your proposal in most cases until you're almost done with the process, right? Until the process is almost completed. So just because you haven't heard anything from us about updates doesn't mean that things aren't happening with your proposal. And I know as a former PI how painful it is to wait, but just because you haven't heard anything from us doesn't mean that your proposal is not moving forward. The other thing I will say that's a very tactical thing, but is the source of a lot of questions, is that once you submit your proposal, you will see my name listed in almost every case initially as the program director, right? The person who's assigned to your proposal will be Ben Schrag. That is done as an administrative convenience. It's something where almost every proposal will then eventually get transferred away from me to the program director, typically who invited your proposal. And so if you're wondering, why is I got invited by Peter, why is Ben's name on my proposal? It's actually just so that we can do the initial compliance screen, and then Peter will eventually, you'll see his name in there, and you'll be able to understand that he's the one who's going to make the decision on your proposal, or Anna, or Henry, or whoever it is. So just FYI, if you see the person you didn't expect, don't worry too much about that either. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's everything is on our website. This is the For Applicants tab, and as you can see, we have the project pitch. Towards the bottom of the screen here, it might be a little hard to see, but you can see a link to the Fastlane guide. That's what I've been calling the step-by-step guide. That will walk you through the process of actually putting things in Fastlane. So I would recommend you bookmarking that or downloading it, because it'll actually let you go screen by screen through our system and explain for an SBIR or STTR proposal how you actually navigate the system. The other thing is that all these webinars are recorded. There's different versions of them. There's recorded webinars. They're all on our page. They're all linked here. You can go and view them at your leisure. The last thing is that there's an FAQ, which covers, it's actually pretty long. It's almost so long it's not useful as an FAQ anymore, but I think there's about 75 common questions we get in different categories. Most of the questions that I suspect you're asking will be covered in the FAQ. So if you want to go there now or go there later and try to check, in a lot of cases they'll cover the most common questions. There's that other, I've talked a little bit about what we're looking for our proposals, and all this information is covered in more depth in our introduction to the program and our webinars that are online. So I don't want to go into too much detail here, but I will point out that we have an extremely commercial focus at NSF, and so you should understand that this is not just an R&D project. This is an investment that we're making, and we're looking to have the funding that we give you results down the road in a strong commercial outcome. And strong commercial outcomes are almost always, in our case, measured by how many customers you have, how much product revenues you have, if you receive private investments, if you get acquired and taken to the next level. So showing us how you're going to go from risky technology to big commercial splash is the real backbone of the proposal. A few reminders, and then I'll open up for questions here. These registrations that I talked about, they take quite a bit of time, and they're out of our control. They are through different government agencies, especially the SAM.gov registration, the System for Award Management. That is something that you can, I think it's pretty fast to start, but it's something you can't hurry. So if you are pretty sure you're going to apply, you should be starting your SAM registration immediately. And in fact, given that the next submission window closes in a couple of weeks, if you have not started your SAM registration, it is likely you may not be able to make the September 3rd window closing. One thing I will say about SAM, this is a very tactical thing, but it trips up a lot of our awardees. When you go into the SAM registration, you're going to be asked whether your company wants to apply for either financial assistance or contracts or both. And those are different kinds of government programs that exist. Contracts is not something NSF does. So you can get authority to apply for our programs, any of our programs, by just asking for financial assistance authority. You do not need contracts authority. The reason I mention that is because the process to get set up as a contractor, to get contract authority, is almost always the most time-consuming, most painful part of the process. And so if your company is not anticipating applying to other contracts programs, you don't have the need for that, I would recommend that you apply for financial assistance only from the SAM.gov folks, because in our experience, that is like multiple times as fast in most cases. The other thing I'll say is that there's a great resource for you when you're actually in the Fastlane system preparing your full proposal, which is the 1-800 number. It's on the top of the Fastlane homepage. It's a help desk of Fastlane experts who are available, I believe, every working day, I think from maybe 7 in the morning Eastern to 7 at night, something like that. And they can really help you with technical issues. So how do I do this thing in Fastlane? How do I push this button? So with any technical issues, you should call that 800 number and let them know. As far as any issues around content, like, what do you want me to talk about in this section? What is the criteria? What is all those things that are specific to our programs? You should call your program director who invited you, or email me or Steve, or email sbir@nsf.gov. And finally, I probably don't need to say this, but it takes time. It takes longer than you expect, so start early.